Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Niemi, as Ruth said, Strategy Director at Silverlight Digital, and I'm going to be talking about analytics. Bit of a dangerous topic to put it towards the end of the day. As way of background, when I started in digital pharma marketing, websites looked something like this. There wasn't really any search. It was broken up into categories, and there were, you can see at the bottom, there were just over 30,000 websites. I'm dating myself a little bit here. As it evolved, got a little bit cleaner. There started to be subcategories. If you look at the top, it says there's a text-only version. That's not to accommodate mobile devices. The iPhone was still about a decade away. That was to accommodate dial-up. This is where it starts to get interesting. This is about mid to late 90s. DoubleClick was founded in 1996. You can see ads started to pop up. At the top there and down at the bottom, you see the Visa ad. So the point is, I've been doing digital pharma marketing since the beginning. So I'm not a data scientist. I'm talking about analytics today, but I'm talking about it from the marketer's point of view, from a media agency, and from the client. So they're not going to be a lot of numbers. There'll be a few. 3 examples, just 3. Focusing on the right audience. Making sure you're talking to exactly who you need to talk to, particularly when we get into situations with rare disease, which we're all very familiar with. Next up, building on that, going beyond traditional analytics, going beyond traditional site consumption data and things like that, which can be valuable, but what we really want to do is connect your media and marketing efforts to things in the real world, sales and things like that. And finally, a 3rd example, it's a little bit more fun. It's not actually a campaign that we did, but there was a lot of news about it. There have been a lot of case studies about it that tend to look at it negatively. I actually think it was a very successful campaign, so we're going to talk about that. So 3 examples, starting off with focusing on the right audience. As pharma marketers, we have to talk to all of these people. We have to talk to all of them differently. If we talk to the gentleman on the right, we talk to him very differently from how we talk to the gentleman on the left. We should also measure them separately. So here's the first example. So this is an audience targeting example. It was a hard-to-find audience. All familiar with these challenges. Is a rare condition, and there were a lot of treatment options. The specific targeting requirements, which again we see this a lot in rare disease, meant there were a lot of near hits. There were a lot of people who had one criteria but not the other. So there was a lot of near hits to the audience. But if you didn't have actually 3, then you actually didn't qualify. So there was a lot of that going on. So what we did was we deployed a broad targeting approach to drill down to the qualified audience. Now the success measure of this, the red type down there at the bottom, was to engage with the audience. The site was actually a very rich, multi-layered site. There was a lot of content that a lot of resources and development had been spent into, and the client really wanted to drive people to consume, naturally, this content. So, it's the first example. This is what we saw when we looked at the raw data for a certain time period, so a couple of months here, in the initial parts of the campaign. Very disappointing. About 20,000 users, a little over a page a session, so pretty much the bare minimum. 35 seconds time on site, not terrible for a branded site, but this was a very robust site. This is not what we were looking for. What I want to look at here today, what we want to talk about today on this first example, is drilling into those actually engaged users. Okay, you can see at the bottom the bounce rate for this site pushed 70%. About 70% of people just left right away. Now, bounce rate is a completely different topic for a different time. Suffice to say, for today's argument, I want to say we want to look at the engaged users. What about the others? What about the ones who didn't bounce? Okay? And the first part is, by definition in Google Analytics, it just defaults to all audiences. When you go in and look in Google Analytics, it defaults to everybody, puts them all into one bucket. If you look at the audience segments, you can actually, with a little bit of effort, you can drill a lot deeper. You can customize these audience segments, but for this first example, I just want to keep it simple. All we wanted to do is say, for those users who engaged, we know there's going to be a high bounce rate. It's very hard to find our particular targets here. What about the ones who stayed? What did they do? So let's look at, again, highlighted in red, non-bounce sessions. A very simple thing. So when we looked a little later in the campaign, We looked at non-bounce sessions only. We factored out those people who weren't interested. Okay, they've gone away. As Ruth said earlier, they hand raised and said, not interested. Okay, well, I'm not interested either. I'm interested in those, in this time period, 6,000 plus people who did stay. And that data looked a lot better when you focused in on those. Over 3 pages per session, time on site pushing 2 minutes, much, much more in line of the goals of the client. So by focusing in on the audience, just putting on blinders and focusing on who you cared about, we actually were able to see that. The site performance was actually pretty good. And you can see the graph on the right of people who saw 2, 3, 4, and up pages. Even there were several hundred who are seeing multiple 7, 8, and 9 pages. So that's the first example. For the second one, we're going to take Google Analytics one step further. And here was a challenge where we wanted to actually bring external data into Google Analytics. Okay. Traditional traffic measurement in Google Analytics broken into these 4 sections. Who's your audience? How did you get them there? Paid search, organic search, display ads. How did they come to be at your site? What did they do when they got there? What content did they look at? All valuable things to know. And if you've incorporated a conversion event into Google Analytics, such as a download or some event like that, you can measure all of those, all on-site behavior. The next step is to connect Google Analytics, which it can do either through syncing directly through the API or, as an example I'm going to show now, just importing the data. Okay? Here are a few examples that hopefully will illustrate exactly what we're talking about here. Inventory data. You can pull in inventory data. So if you're promoting a particular product, you don't run an ad for something that's out of stock. Pretty obvious. Actually, pretty easy to accomplish. Retail activity. Connect digital media to what's going on with physical store visits. The example of the bottom is an example of that. I'll touch on that in a second. And then call center and CRM volume. As pharma marketers, we're frequently integrating with CRM systems, with outbound emails, with call centers where there's going to be a physical connection and someone's going to call. That data can also be pulled in so we can connect media activity to something that's happening offline. So that example, the retail activity, and this is a Google example. One retailer did a test where they uploaded 36 days of in-store data, and they were able to figure out pretty quickly that 44% of their buyers had visited their website within a week before purchase, and almost 10% had visited the site on the same day as purchase. So there was a clear correlation between what was happening online and what was happening in the stores. So let's talk about a pharma situation where the client specifically challenged us with connecting a campaign to prescribing lift, to prescribing activity. He wanted to look at new prescribing activity, and he wanted to look at overall lift year on year. So the brand had been flat for years. That actually made our life easy because the sales trajectory had not changed in multiple years. So anything we could do to lift the sales trajectory would be very, very noticeable. The challenge was to drive NRXs, and our approach was to import this script data into Google Analytics to associate script lift with digital media. Now, from a typical analytics standpoint, this campaign performed pretty well. Click-through rates were good, cost per clicks were good. We had a nice patient brochure. There was a pediatric indication, so we had parent information, patient information. There was a savings card, all there. And with downloads of that patient brochure, there were several thousand of them driven at about a CPA of about $16. So from a traditional analytics standpoint, this was a high-performing campaign. That's not what we were looking for. When we imported the prescribing data, we did a couple of things. We looked at before and after one particular time period, and we were to see that the NRXs grew from 285, just under 300 per week on average, to almost 500. We could directly connect those two. And the increase in total RXs over that same period was about 1,200. Then what we did was we looked at the calendar year, the year previous. As I said, the brand sales had been flat for many, many years, and we compared it to the current year where we ran the campaign. So this chart, simple line chart, the bottom line was pretty much where the sales were every year until we instituted this, and then the top line was the year that we launched the campaign. So if you take the area between those two curves. You've got the lift in scripts that we were able to attribute directly to the media by importing it into Google Analytics. And if you multiply that by the average cost of the product, you came up with a ROI for this, about 5.5 times the cost of the overall campaign, directly attributable to media. So Google Analytics, great tool off the shelf, does a whole bunch of site consumption things, but there's a lot more power. Both these examples have been there's a lot more power under the hood when you push it a little further, when you pull it in external data. So let's talk about one more example, and this is about defining success in advance, which is a theme that you'll see through all of these. They were very clearly set out to do very one specific thing. Now, this next example is a little bit more of a fun one. We didn't work on it ourselves, so we're making some assumptions about what the goals are. So here's the situation. We had to drive very fast awareness. They had to drive very fast awareness of a fairly undifferentiated product. All of the components of the product were available over the counter for a lot less than the prescription product. And the short-term sales opportunity, they wanted to get out very quickly. There were competitive issues. There were some safety issues, so they weren't sure how long they were going to be able to stay in market. The challenge, again, as I said, there had been some historical safety issues. And the target was expectant mothers. So very crowded market, very highly coveted audience. And so the idea was to use social media for fast reach, drive quick online awareness, and then connect that directly to revenue. Okay? So here's the approach they took. And with all due respect to our esteemed panel of doctors earlier, let's talk about everybody's favorite healthcare professional. And here's what they came up with. So I think this is the first pharma ad in history that starts off with OMG as the lead line. Also, I like this line in here. It says, he prescribed me and I felt a lot better. She wasn't pregnant at the time. So there are safety links down at the bottom, so it looks like might be okay with regulatory, but the industry roundly pounced on this ad and denounced it as a misfire, making us think of the esteemed Charlie Munger, who said, we recognized early on that very smart people do very dumb things. Okay, so Charlie Munger, I just mentioned him because if it wasn't for the fact that he works for Warren Buffett, he'd be the most famous investor in the world. He's the COO of Berkshire Hathaway, and he is completely focused on the idea of matching the right resource, the right people to the right task, making sure you have the right thing doing exactly what you want to accomplish. He's got some great quotes. He's a really interesting guy. One of the ways he illustrates that idea of matching tools to task was, if Warren had gone to ballet, no one would ever have heard of him. So that's Charlie Munger. But back on track. So was it a dumb thing? Kim Kardashian's posts got 500,000 likes, and this is Instagram. So that happened fast. That happened in hours, not days, not weeks, hours. 500,000 likes, 11,000 comments. Online conversations spiked. A third of all online conversations around this mentioned the post, and the drug was discussed way, way more than any of its competitors. So online, great results. Offline, this happened. There's a line in this letter that I don't think has ever been said before or since. OPDP has reviewed the Kim Kardashian social media post. So the FDA was not amused. A retraction was demanded. And a retraction was posted. This reads a lot more like a pharma ad. It's the same picture, I believe. And it's all the safety information is there now. Causes one to wonder. I've read that Mrs. West gets $500,000 per social media post. So did they have to pay her $1 million because there were 2 posts, or was it just $500,000 for the retraction? Nevertheless, this retraction satisfied the FDA. Okay? No fine was levied, no removals ordered, and the drug spiked. So it wasn't a public company, so it's a little hard to get exactly what the numbers look like. From the best we can tell, the promotion added a quick $20 million in incremental sales, and this drug, which again available, all the components are available over the counter. It's really not a very impressive product. Was doing almost $200 million. They continued this social media approach, albeit with less controversial posters, with more health and wellness social media influencers. And all in all, we're able to drive it. This brings to mind the adage I once heard for a big pharma product manager who go nameless, who said, if you don't get a letter from the FDA, you're not trying hard enough. So, but in all seriousness, they set what the goal was. They knew needed to get out quick. They knew they had a very short time frame, a couple of years, which was it. By 2017, this pretty much was over. And they did it. They got out. They drove sales. Laughing all the way to the bank comes to mind. Focused on their goal. So, bringing it all back to the top, focus on the right audience, know exactly who you're talking to, and put on blinders. Don't worry about anyone else. Don't worry about those 70% bouncers. Worry about those 30% who are staying. That's who you care about. That's who you need to influence. Go beyond traditional analytics. And don't just go in and say, OK, we built a website. Let's go in and look. Let's see how many pages people looked at. Let's see how much time they spent on site. Well, if you have a one-page landing page, then why are you looking at the number of page views? It's always going to be one. Doesn't matter. OK? So go beyond traditional analytics and really measure what matters. You've seen examples that all tied to sales, script lift, and revenue in this example. And tailor your campaign to drive those success measures, whatever it may be. Just saw an example where they picked a very controversial approach, and that worked very well. Which brings to mind a final quote of this talk. This is the first marketing officer of Nike. Very, very blunt, very brash guy, helped build Nike into the powerhouse it was. Perfect results count, not a perfect process. Break the laws, fight the law. Break through traditional means, which he clearly was a master of, and don't listen to the way that things should be done. So, thank you for listening. I'm Peter Niemi. That's my time for today. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to break the laws with you.
We got a question over here. State your name and where you're from.
Hi, Joe Fullman from Biolumina. Was just wondering if you guys have tried integrating data sources like 6 Sense or Demandbase, DMD's AIM, like in the professional side, to just kind of get a view of how specific physicians are using your websites.
Yeah, sure. So we work with a lot of data integration. I'm on the strategy side, and I'm sure our ad ops head, Damien DeFrancis, would love to talk to you further. He's unfortunately at home, well, fortunately for him, with his 1-week-old, so he's not here today. But yeah, we've done data integrations. As a matter of fact, a good 50% of our business is on the HCP, so we are doing data integrations to track them directly all the time.
Peter, my name is Brian Gartside. I work in the rare disease space. And the one thing I struggle with, I actually came from anything but rare disease. I used to be in diabetes marketing, where everybody has diabetes.
Yes.
And now I'm working in a product where very, very few people. And the thing we struggle with is with rare disease, reaching 12 people might be my supervisor would be wildly happy if I converted 12 people. And when you look at the traditional measures, that doesn't really account for that. Do you have any insights that how to deal with that?
Yes, so there was actually a topic at last year's Pulse that focused just on that. The short answer, and it's a multifaceted answer, of course, is that you don't want to over-target right at the beginning, because you need to hone down. When it's that small a number, and we do work in categories where it's that small a number, there is going to have to be some level of self-identifying, whether that's the patient themselves or their healthcare provider, their healthcare professional. So it's a matter of starting broad, bringing them into the category, and bringing them down to the niche within the niche that they're probably within. And then, yeah, it's an ongoing and iterative process. And happy to talk offline about examples where we've gone through sharing your pain. But yeah, you have to start broad, define the category, and then narrow and narrow and narrow until you get to your target.
Oh.
Hi, I'm Jessica with Ocular Therapeutics. We're focused on obviously.
Yep.
I'm just curious, and I'm so glad that you didn't ignore the fact that the FDA has a huge, weight on what we can and cannot do when it comes to digital advertising and digital marketing. And I'm just curious, I personally fear getting in Facebook and getting in certain realms of social media just because of the lack of control. And if you've seen any trends in better ways to do it, or if you've seen trends in getting away from things like specifically Facebook in order to kind of protect companies that, especially smaller companies like ours, where it's a bigger risk, I think.
Sure, whenever you get into a Facebook, or we've done campaigns on Twitter where there's the ability to comment, and now suddenly you're responsible for any AEs or user-generated content.
Exactly.
So it's such a case-by-case basis, and even the regulations change on a daily basis. So it's you need to go down the path of getting to a place where people cannot comment and cannot interact. So yeah, it's a case-by-case basis, but we definitely run into that all the time. We're dealing with a couple of clients right now where they want to roll up, but they want to roll up into Facebook, but they're just, now we have to maintain a page, and how do we? Yep.
Hi, I'm here.
Hello. Oh, right in front of me. There we go.
So I'm from Bristol Myers Squibb.
Hi.
Question about unbranded campaigns.
Sure.
Have you done any analysis that can actually measure an ROI, maybe even a script lift or something like that for an unbranded campaign? Like, how do you measure the success of an unbranded campaign?
Well, the example we showed there, that was the connection to script lift, it was branded, but the unbranded, that's just a messaging thing. That's more on the content side. So we can take the unbranded content, and I would say, thinking of all of the campaigns I'm working on now, every single one of them's got an unbranded component. So we can certainly segment that off and connect those particular messages to whatever the success measure may be, whether it's script lift or not. And by tagging it properly and pulling in the external data, yeah, we can associate anything with anything. The example I showed was a little simple, just to be illustrative. But yeah, we can do a direct association with any content. I know it was risky putting an analytics talk towards the end of the day, so thank you all for staying, and thank you all for listening. And I'm going to turn it back over to